You wake before dawn, polishing a cold crown you never earned, while a sealed envelope waits beside your coffee like a quiet ultimatum. Inside is a handshake drawn in ink and shadow, promising you a throne if you become the house where everyone must keep their savings. You sign with a steady smile. Yet your pen drags like a blade, carving a private doorway where strangers can enter your ribs. The deal is simple. You feed the world paper comfort, and the world feeds you obedience. Each meal served with applause and denial. At first it feels holy, like sunlight obeying you, like clocks resetting themselves, like every road bending toward your name without complaint. But power has a taste, metallic and sweet, and soon you need more witnesses, more vows, more hands holding your promise like bread. You begin printing blessings, thin as skin, and people kiss them for warmth, forgetting that warmth borrowed too often becomes a fever. In back rooms, partners smile with teeth hidden, asking for favors, asking for silence, asking you to carry their sins in your suitcase. You say yes, because kings do not admit hunger, and because the world's admiration is a drug that punishes you the moment you stop. Each new promise stacks like floors in a tower, and you keep climbing, pretending the tremble under your boots is only the wind. Soon your allies become landlords, measuring your breath, counting your nights, reminding you that a throne can be rented, not owned. You start borrowing tomorrow to pay for today, stitching smiles over cracks, hosting grand banquets while rats learn your hidden roots. The world keeps depositing faith into your hands, and your hands begin to shake, because faith is heavy when it must stay liquid. You notice the servants whispering, trading your portrait for other faces, testing new hymns that do not include your name. Then comes the slow revolt, not flags or cannons, but quiet refusals. Doors left unlocked, ledgers closed softly, eyes looking past you. Your crown feels lighter each week, not from mercy, but from thinning metal, as if your glory is being filed away in darkness. You try to tighten control with louder speeches, brighter lights, sharper smiles, yet every effort sounds like coins dropping into an empty well. The secret deal returns in nightmares. The handshake, now a chain. The ink now tar, and you realize you traded trust for dependence. When they finally stop needing your paper warmth, you feel the room go cold, and your heartbeat becomes the only currency left. You stand alone with a ruined crown, watching your own promises circle you like wolves. And you understand you were never king, only collateral. You remember the early applause, how it echoed like church bells, teaching you to confuse noise with devotion, and devotion with something that could never leave you. The deal grows roots beneath the floorboards, quiet vines wrapping your ankles, while you host ceremonies celebrating freedom you already surrendered. Every visitor bows not to you, but to the chair you sit on, and you begin guarding the furniture more fiercely than your own pulse. You lend mirrors instead of shelter, and the world thanks you for reflections, mistaking their own faces for safety and permanence. At night you hear the printing rooms breathing, a mechanical lung that never sleeps, inhaling trust and exhaling obligations you refuse to name. You call it stability, though it behaves like a debt collector tapping softly at the inside of your skull. Patient, precise, impossible to evict. Friends arrive smiling, leave heavier, and you tell yourself their weight is proof of loyalty, not a tax paid for standing near you. You stop counting promises, letting them blur into wallpaper, because numbers feel less frightening when they lose their edges. The crown tightens, resized by invisible hands, and you convince yourself discomfort is the same thing as responsibility. Beyond your windows, smaller houses start building their own fires. Learning warmth without asking permission or blessing, you answer with generosity, flooding rooms with paper comfort, hoping abundance will drown curiosity before it learns to ask why. But abundance makes people restless, and soon they test your gifts like ice, tapping for cracks, listening for hollow sounds. Advisors speak in lullabies, telling you control is eternal, that gravity itself depends on your continued calm breathing. You nod, because doubt would mean revisiting the signature, and the ink still burns whenever you look directly at it. The world's footsteps grow quieter, not from fear, but from practice, as they learn how to walk without waking you. You sense motion elsewhere, doors opening in foreign corridors, yet you stay seated, trusting the throne to warn you. It does not, because furniture has no loyalty, only weight, and weight always seeks a stronger floor. You tighten your grip, mistaking tension for strength. Unaware that clenched hands cannot hold water for long, somewhere the deal smiles, pleased with your discipline, pleased with how carefully you polish the cage. You fall asleep believing tomorrow still belongs to you, while tomorrow quietly signs its own separate agreement. Morning arrives thinner now, like light filtered through smoke, and you sense the room measuring you the way a creditor studies silence. You speak of confidence, yet your words echo too long, revealing empty space behind them where certainty once lived. The crown no longer warms your skin, it insulates you, a barrier that keeps real hands from ever touching your temples. You notice maps being redrawn quietly, borders erased with erasers instead of knives, roots bending away from your halls. Every favor you once granted returns as a reminder. Polite notes asking repayment in patience, obedience, or time. You begin selling hours of the future, boxed and labeled, telling yourself tomorrow is an endless warehouse. Sleep becomes a negotiation. Dreams interrupted by ledgers flipping their own pages in the dark. Outside, markets hum like insects, learning a new rhythm, one that does not sync with your heartbeat anymore. You host another summit of smiles, but the chairs feel farther apart. The laughter timed, the exits memorized. Trust leaks slowly, not as a flood, but as a stain spreading under expensive rugs you refuse to lift. You hear phrases like alternatives and resilience spoken softly, as if saying them loudly might summon your attention. The deal tightens again, not pulling, just reminding you it exists. Like a hand resting on your shoulder too long, you respond by shining brighter, polishing speeches, widening gestures, hoping spectacle can replace gravity. It cannot, because gravity is quiet work, and spectacle is loud begging. Somewhere, a clock you do not own sets the pace, and you find yourself adjusting steps to match it. You start mistaking motion for progress, activity for loyalty, noise for necessity. The world practices living without you in small ways. Rehearsal dinners for a future you are not invited to. You feel it when requests slow, when gratitude thins, when silence stops sounding respectful. The crown slips once during a pause, and no one reaches to steady it. You catch it yourself, smiling, finally aware that balance has become a solo performance. You begin waking earlier, not from ambition, but from the feeling that something is quietly rearranging the room without asking you. The walls look the same, yet their patience feels thinner, as if they are waiting for you to admit you no longer decide the layout. Couriers arrive less often, and when they do, their messages feel rehearsed, polished to hide what they are no longer delivering. You reread old agreements searching for authority, but the words have faded into suggestions instead of commands. The throne creaks now when you shift, reminding you that even symbols age when leaned on too heavily. You respond by announcing permanence, carving it into speeches, repeating it until repetition pretends to be truth. Outside your gates, patience turns into planning, and planning turns into quiet construction you were never invited to inspect. You feel it in conversations that end faster, in smiles that detach before their eyes are done speaking. The deal hums again, low and satisfied, pleased that you still listen even when no one else does. You mistake silence for respect, not noticing how efficiently respect has learned to move on. Advisors bring charts disguised as comfort, telling you everything is fine if you stop asking where everyone went. You agree? Because chasing absence would require admitting that presence was never guaranteed. The crown leaves an imprint now, a ring of pressure reminding you that balance has become physical labor. You discover entire rooms operating without your name spoken. Systems, breathing calmly beyond your reach. Panic visits briefly, then leaves, replaced by routine. Because fear that lasts too long becomes furniture. You begin managing impressions instead of outcomes, polishing reflections while foundations quietly settle elsewhere. The world's appetite changes, and your offering tastes familiar, comforting, and increasingly optional. You lower your voice, hoping intimacy will replace authority, hoping closeness can substitute for command. It does not, because closeness without leverage is just nostalgia wearing a friendly face. As night falls, you realize the room no longer needs you awake, only predictable. By now. Even echoes hesitate before answering you, as if the room must confirm your relevance before allowing sound to return. You notice calendars thinning, pages torn away elsewhere, time being spent without consulting your permission. Old allies arrive briefly, speak carefully, and leave behind phrases that sound like condolences disguised as strategy. You keep offering guarantees, stacking them like blankets, unaware that warmth is no longer what anyone is cold from. The deal sits quietly now, no longer humming. Confident enough to sleep while you remain awake, you begin rehearsing exits in your mind, though you still call them contingencies to protect your pride. Control becomes ceremonial, a ribbon cut daily to celebrate doors that no longer open where they once did. You sense substitution everywhere, familiar rituals replaced with softer, cheaper, more flexible motions. The crown slips more often, and you stop mentioning it. Afraid attention might accelerate gravity. Your voice lowers again, not for intimacy this time, but because shouting would reveal how few are listening. Beyond the horizon, agreements multiply without you, signatures drying before your messengers even arrive. You receive copies instead of originals, summaries instead of invitations, acknowledgments instead of influence. The throne room feels larger, not grander, empty space stretching like a reminder of what absence can afford. You begin mistaking solitude for sovereignty, telling yourself kings are always alone at the top. But solitude answers differently now. Colder, uninterested in flattery or legacy. You adjust policies like masks, changing expressions faster than the face beneath can heal. Each adjustment costs more effort and returns less effect, like shouting into snow. The world no longer resists you. It simply routes around you with professional courtesy. You realize resistance was proof of relevance, and ease is what arrives when something stops mattering. That night, you sit perfectly still, sensing the crown balancing itself without kneading your neck. The days lose their edges now, blending together like ink and water, and you struggle to remember when you last set the rhythm. Messages arrive after decisions are made, informative rather than consultative, polite enough to hide their finality. You nod often, a habit formed to disguise how rarely your agreement is still required. The crown feels ceremonial, lighter, almost symbolic, like a prop borrowed for a play nearing its final act. You sense patience evaporating everywhere at once, replaced by efficiency that no longer waits for permission. Old threats stop working, not because they are forgiven, but because they are outdated. You test your reach and find distance where connection once lived. Space filled with new intermediaries. The deal no longer checks on you, certain that momentum alone will finish the work it started. You begin framing retreats as partnerships, withdrawals as realignments, exits as evolution. Language becomes camouflage, carefully chosen to soften the sound of footsteps leaving. The throne room hosts fewer ceremonies, more briefings, stripped of drama, allergic to delay. You realize spectacle required belief, and belief has learned to live elsewhere. Your reflection looks rehearsed, a face practiced at reassurance, tired of convincing itself. Outside, the world experiments freely, failing quickly, adjusting faster than you can approve. You request loyalty and receive compliance, which feels similar until it suddenly does not. Compliance bends without breaking, and you feel power sliding through your fingers. The crown tilts again, but you let it, curious whether anything will collapse if you stop correcting. Nothing does, and the quiet confirmation feels heavier than panic ever was. You understand then that systems mature by outgrowing their creators. You sit back, exhausted, watching relevance fade without ceremony or sound. You wake to find schedules already filled, meetings concluded, outcomes archived, as if the day decided it no longer needed your signature. The throne room smells different, less like polish and ceremony, more like transit, a place people pass through without stopping. You overhear plans spoken in the present tense that once waited for your future approval. The deal feels distant now, not hostile, simply uninterested. Like a machine that learned your absence early, you test authority with a small command and watch it return softened, filtered, adjusted by hands you never authorized. Nobody refuses you outright. Refusal has evolved into delay into irrelevance. You remember when hesitation around you meant fear, and fear meant leverage. Now hesitation means courtesy, and courtesy is what people use when power has already moved on. Your advisors speak less, having learned that silence carries fewer consequences than honesty. You reward efficiency even when it excludes you, mistaking smoothness for loyalty. The crown rests lightly again, no longer pressing, no longer demanding correction. You realize it is balanced by the room, not by your spine. Outside, entire systems coordinate themselves, breathing in sync without waiting for instruction. You feel a strange relief watching this, followed immediately by grief you cannot publicly acknowledge. Control fades quietly when it is no longer contested. You replay the beginning, the handshake, the promise of permanence, and notice how temporary it always sounded. What you called dominance was dependence wearing confident language. The world thanks you politely, then continues as if thanks were closure. You stand, uncertain where to walk, because exits were designed for authority, not witnesses. In the stillness, you accept that the crown survived you, and that survival is the final verdict. You wake without urgency, because urgency belonged to days when your reaction could still change outcomes. The room breathes evenly now, systems steady, lights timed, doors opening and closing with practiced indifference. Your name appears less often, and when it does, it is framed as history rather than instruction. You realize power did not leave suddenly. It rehearsed its departure in front of you for years. The deal dissolves quietly, not broken, simply completed. Its purpose fulfilled without your consent or farewell. You search for a moment of collapse, but find only continuity. Smooth and almost merciful, the crown rests on the table, untouched, reflecting a face that no longer expects obedience. You understand then that authority is only borrowed attention. Return the moment, belief finds a better home. Outside, life moves efficiently, grateful for what you once provided, unconcerned with where you now sit. There is no reckoning, no applause, no villain to blame, only replacement performed with professional grace. You feel lighter, not freed, but released from pretending that control was permanent. Memory sharpens, showing you how willingly you traded resilience for convenience. The world did not ruin you, it outgrew the structure you represented. You remain intact, yet irrelevant, a condition quieter than defeat. The throne stands empty without drama, its absence already accounted for. You step away slowly, discovering how small the room feels without expectation. What remains is not collapse, but succession without ceremony. You accept that being central was always temporary, dependence disguised as destiny. In the end, nothing hunts you, nothing falls apart, nothing asks forgiveness. The story closes not with ruin, but with continuation that no longer needs your voice.